Welcome everyone to the very first setup video for Tony Stewart's All-American Racing. Now in today's video we're going to focus on the big block modifieds at Baxterville Speedway. Now only the big blocks will be featured in today's video due to some time constraints, but we'll see how things go for future videos. If the legends and the street stocks are something you guys are really interested in, let me know in the comment section below and I'll spend some more time on those. But again, due to some time constraints, I couldn't really finalize setups for those other two divisions here for today's video. So what are we going to focus on in today's video? Well, I'm not as much interested in pure speed qualifying type setups, because if you're running 100% feature events, which at Baxterville would be 40 laps, you're going to spend a lot of time in traffic. So that is what I'm going to focus on. The setup is intended to be very stable and something that you can control when you're in those 2 and 3 wide settings, sometimes 4 wide, whether you're racing against the AI or online multiplayer. So stability is the name of the game above all else, but of course, it doesn't mean we can't be fast as well. As we begin our setup discussion, keep in mind that the way you drive this track is going to mean a lot about how you need the car to be set up. You can run this track wide open. However, I did not set up the car to do that. The reason being, I'm focused on stability in traffic, and on top of that, my fastest laps were not run completely wide open around the track. Instead, my preference is to back out of the gas a little bit on corner entry. That allows the car to rotate. Once I get the car rotated, I'm back in the gas and I simply tap the brake just a little bit. Doesn't need very much at all, but I use the brake as well as the steering to make sure that the car is always pointed and I'm running the line that I want. So don't focus so much on being 100% throttle all the time, and instead focus on the line that you're running and making sure that your car is always under control. Let's begin our setup discussion with the front end of the car. So I'm going to sort of look at, while it's broken down into 4 corners, I'm going to sort of look at the front together and the rear together. So let's get started on the front. Camber angle of +3 and then -5 on the right front. I tested out quite a bit with more camber than this on both of the front tires, and I also tested out with less camber. And what I found is that the camber really wasn't about speed so much as it was the feel in the car. If you're looking for quicker transactions into the corner and quicker feel overall from the car, then maybe use more camber than what I'm showing you. However, if you want more stability, you want the car to be a little bit less twitchy to you, then maybe a little bit less camber than what I'm showing you. But again, I use camber angles all the way down from on the low end about 1 to 1.5 degrees, and on the high end well above the -5 that you see on the right front. Again, it's all about the feel and less about the speed, and of course your driving style is going to dictate quite a bit on this. Now the spring rate that we're looking at, 300 pounds on the left front, 500 on the right front. It's all about the relationship between these two. But specifically on the left front, the higher the number you use on the left front spring, the better you're going to get into the corner. The looser the car is going to be on corner entry. The more you reduce this number, the tighter the car will generally be on entry to the corner. In the right front, we're using the maximum of 500 pounds, and that is simply to give me something for stability, give me something to lean on out of the car. I don't like the car to roll quite as much, and using the maximum right front spring definitely gives me something to lean on and gives me a good amount of stability. However, if you really want to get the car to rotate much better on corner entry, then one of your options is to use a stiffer left front spring than right front. So if you reverse these and had 500 pounds on the left front, 300 pounds on the right front, that is certainly going to loosen up the entry and allow that car to rotate much quicker and much more overall. The shocks, you're going to see the 3-5 settings on bump and rebound across all 4 corners of the car. Certainly a lot of fine tuning that you can do with the shocks, but I didn't really see that it was necessary, and certainly not something I want to get into on a baseline setup that I'm giving you guys here on the channel. So we'll move on to the tire pressures. So 18 on the left front, 20 on the right front. Again, we're using more pressure on the right front for the same reason that we used a stiffer spring in the right front. I very much want to have that stability in the right front, as it gives me something to pivot off of and gives me that stability. But dropping the right front tire pressure is going to loosen up the car overall, and specifically on corner entry. Increasing the tire pressure in the right front will tighten the car on corner entry as well as overall. On the left front, think of the tire pressure the same way you think of the spring rate. Increasing that tire pressure from 18 to 19, 20, and so on will loosen the car on corner entry. And of course, reducing the tire pressure will have the opposite effect. Moving on now to the rear springs. 400 and 500 in the rear. I like to use about 100 pounds of rear spring split. That has what's worked best so far for me, but of course it's still early since the release of the game. But 100 pounds of rear spring split, this really dictates the amount of split between the left rear and right rear is really going to dictate the stability of the car when you're heavy on the throttle. If you want the car to be really loose when you're on the gas, then use more split in the rear spring, something like 500 pounds, which again is the maximum right rear spring, and something like, say, 200 or 300 pounds in the left rear. That's certainly going to loosen up that car when you're on the gas. But if you want more stability, if you want the car to be tighter under heavy throttle, then simply use less split in the rear springs. Also, another option is to adjust the rear springs together. Once you've got a good amount of split that works well for you, then you can adjust both rear springs together. And the more the more rear spring you use overall, the looser the car will be. The less rear spring that you use, the tighter the car will be overall. So again, a lot of adjustability simply in those rear springs and in controlling the rotation of the car. Now, another thing to point out is about the tire pressures in the rear of the car. You notice there is more tire pressure in the left rear than right rear. 18 pounds in the left rear, 16 in the right rear. And the reason for that is dropping that right rear tire pressure tightens the car. So if I want to tighten the car even more, then I simply continue to drop the right rear tire pressure. It gives me a little bit more grip, a little bit more stability out of that corner of the car, and overall gives me a better feel. However, if you're looking to increase the rotation, if you're looking to make the car looser, then increase that right rear tire pressure. Also, looking at the left rear tire pressure, if you want to tighten the car, particularly under heavy throttle from the center of the corner on exit, or if you're one of those guys that wants to use max 100% throttle the entire way around the track, then increasing the left rear tire pressure is going to tighten that car up, give you a little bit more stability. Reducing the left rear tire pressure is going to loosen the car under throttle. And then the final thing I want to talk about here is the tire stagger. Now, I'm using the maximum 4.0 inches of stagger in the right rear. The more stagger you use, the better the car is going to rotate. So if you want the car to be looser overall, if you are looking to maintain more speed through the corners, then more tire stagger will give you that. However, you just have to be careful because it is going to change the way the car handles. More tire stagger is going to make the car much looser overall, and it's very easy for the car to over-rotate. So pay attention to that tire stagger, but my general recommendation is to start at the maximum amount, and then if you are simply unstable, then you can reduce that tire stagger a little bit. But more tire stagger is ultimately going to mean more speed if you can handle the way that makes the car feel. Now, moving on to the front and the rear settings, brake bias is going to be something, the numbers are going to be all over the place with this because it really depends on how you use the brakes. For me, I use the brakes just a little bit on entry of the corner, maybe just a touch through the center if I'm in heavy traffic and really need to fine tune the line I'm running and running a very tight line, then I can use the brakes for that. So I'm using a slightly higher number than I might use overall. We're still less than 50%. However, the higher the number you use for the brake bias, the tighter the car will be whenever you apply the brakes. So if you are someone who wants to use the brakes to maybe control the rotation of the car, this is a great way to do it. Less brake bias is going to loosen the car under braking. It's going to make the rear end swing around more. More brake bias is going to tighten the car. It's going to make the car rotate less under braking. So keep that in mind. It is a very valuable tool for controlling the rotation of the car. Now, front weight and as well as the corner weight, this is your wedge number that we're generally used to seeing from the NASCAR Heat Series. Now, the left weight we're not really going to talk about because we're on an oval. We want all the left weight that we can get. But going back to that front weight, this is how we control the overall rotation of the car. If you want the car to rotate less, then simply increase this front weight number. If you need the car to rotate more, then drop this number down about 0.5% to 1% and you should see a nice difference there. But 46.0 was a very good amount of front weight for me to, again, keep the car stable and so that I could maximally control the rotation and make sure I can hit my marks each and every lap. Corner weight is maxed out at 55.0. I did this because, again, I want the ultimate control over the rotation of the car. And the higher the number you use on the corner weight, that's going to add stability. It's going to tighten up the rotation. It's going to make the rotation slower overall in the car. If you're looking for quicker rotations out of the car and more rotation overall, then simply drop this number by 0.5%, 1%, or even more, and you should notice a big difference in the car's rotation. The anti-roll bar maxed out at 2.0. For those of you who are following me in the NASCAR Heat Series, you'll know that's going to look very familiar. And the reason for that is the same reason from the NASCAR Heat Series, and that is control. I want to control the amount of roll and the amount of rotation in the car, and this allows me to do just that. However, it certainly doesn't mean that you have to use the maximum anti-roll bar. I'm simply using it because I want the ultimate control over the rotation of the car and the amount of weight transfer and the amount of overall body roll in the car. I don't like a lot of body roll in the car as it tends to reduce the stability in the car. So this worked perfectly for me. However, if you want the car to roll more through the corner, if you like that feeling or if that helps you overall, then simply reduce the anti-roll by 1 to 2 clicks. See if that doesn't improve things for you, and then go from there. Ride height really hasn't had to mess with that at all. So now let's move on to the rear of the car. So in the rear of the car, we also have an anti-roll setting, and this is basically at the minimum setting while still maintaining an anti-roll bar. So you notice if I reduce this, it takes the anti-roll bar away completely. So I do like to have that anti-roll bar there. However, the higher the number you use here, the looser the car will be overall. The more the rear of the car will want to steer overall. And I found that while I do want an anti-roll bar, I don't need any more than that 1/2 inch that we get with the minimum setting. But again, if you're looking for a looser car overall, then simply increase this number. So now moving on to the track bar. So no track bar on the right-hand side, but 0.5 on the left-hand side. The reason for that is the left-hand side of the track bar really helps to fine-tune the entry of the corner. So a higher number here helps the car to rotate better on corner entry, so that's why we're using it. However, the exit of the corner, once I get the car rotated on entry, I didn't really need any help on the exit, so I'm using the 0 setting here. However, if you need the car to be looser on exit, if you need the car to rotate better on the exit of the corner, then increase this number. Now let's move on to the miscellaneous section. So we've got wheel lock and steering offset. The wheel lock here, I expected to use a much higher number than the 10 degrees. And again, for those of you who follow me in the NASCAR Heat Series, this is the same number that I use in the NASCAR Heat Series. However, the reason I expected to use a much higher number is because generally on dirt, I'm used to using something north of 15. So somewhere around 17, 18, 20, maybe even more on some tracks if it has tighter corners. So if you have something closer to Martinsville, which I know there's a track here that is very tight on the corners, similar to that. Maybe I'll use more steering lock or wheel lock at a place like that. But here, 10 degrees worked just fine. However, if I am looking for quicker steering input, if I want to use less wheel and get more out of the steering, then I simply increase this number. In this case, 10 degrees is the minimum number, so we can't go down any lower, but something around 15 to 20 range will certainly give you a quicker feel out of the steering. Steering offset is heavily related to how much to the right you want to turn and how much time you want to spend turning to the right. For me, 1.5 gave me exactly the feel I was looking for. I don't have to turn a huge amount to the right, but I do spend probably 90% of the lap turning to the right. So I wanted to really dial this in to get the amount of steering to the right that I wanted. For me, 1.5 works really well. If you want to turn more to the right, then simply reduce the steering offset. If you don't want to turn to the right as much, then increase this number. However, be careful about increasing it too far, because you can introduce a pull to the right, which will really make the car feel unstable. The last thing you want is the car to be unstable as you're preparing for corner entry, which is exactly what I've had happen when I use the steering offset that is too high. And then we come to the tire compound. And this one is really confusing, honestly, as to why it exists right now. As far as I can tell, there is currently no tire wear in the game. In fact, I can't even find a pop-up menu to give me tire pressures or tire temperatures when I'm on the track. So it's certainly something that I could be overlooking, but at this point, I have zero information about either tire temperatures or tire pressures while I'm on the track. And based on the lap times that I've seen when running 100% feature races, I've seen no tire wear whatsoever. And that is very important because that's what the tire compound would be for. The softest tire compound would give you the most grip, but over the course of a long race could fall off and even fail. I've seen that happen in sprint cars quite a bit when the right rear tire will fail over the course of a long race for various reasons, but that would be why you'd want to use a harder compound. But again, right now, the medium and firm tires will give you less grip, but the idea is that they should be better on a long run. I just simply haven't seen that come to fruition with the lack of tire wear currently in the game. But by all means, play around with these. For me, they had less grip and made the car looser overall, since my setup was designed around the maximum grip soft compound. So hopefully some point in the future, we'll have to come in and actually take a look at using some of those, maybe when they implement tire wear in the game. Now, as far as the gear settings, really didn't mess around with this a whole lot. I don't like to run max RPMs to where I'm hitting that rev limiter extremely hard. But keep in mind, the rear end ratio and the number of RPMs you're running overall can be used to adjust the handling of the car. More RPMs, meaning using a higher number here, going from 540 to a 550 and so on, that's going to have you turning more RPMs and is overall going to make the car looser. Dropping this number from a 540 to something like a 530 or even lower is going to have you running fewer RPMs, which means that the car is generally going to be tighter overall. So again, just another tool in the toolbox of adjusting the car's handling. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and stay tuned for more Tony Stewart All-American Racing.